So I'd like to begin with an opening prayer and set our meeting in that context. And the prayer I'd like to begin with is one of the opening prayers of the second Sunday of Easter. I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes those opening prayers for Mass, they're kind of complex, they kind of go over our head, and then we're waiting for the readings to start. But I think the one for the second Sunday of Easter, which was the octave of Easter, or Divine Mercy Sunday, it's a wonderful collect that kind of brings together who we are as Catholics and Christians. So let me begin with that as an opening prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. God of everlasting mercy, increase the grace that you have bestowed, that all may grasp and rightly understand in what font they have been washed, by whose Spirit they have been reborn, by whose blood they have been redeemed, through Christ our Lord. I just want to analyze three things. In what font they have been washed, the sacrament of baptism. By whose Spirit they have been reborn, the sacrament of confirmation. By whose blood they have been redeemed, the sacrament of the Eucharist. And those three sacraments are our sacraments of initiation, and all of us here have received those sacraments, and that makes us united to one another in Christ. That makes us brothers and sisters in the Lord. And so we're gathered here tonight as the church in Auburn. We are united in one Catholic faith to try to discern what is best for the Catholic community here in Auburn and in northern Cayuga. Now, those of you who have been around a while are quite aware that pastoral planning has been going on in our diocese for many, many years. When I first came here back in 2004, there was pastoral planning going on. Before I even came here, there was pastoral planning going on. And back in 2018, we had very intensive pastoral planning, which led to our 2 clusters here in Auburn. And so in the last year, more pastoral planning has gone on, because things keep changing and evolving, and we need to keep looking at what's happening as we project ourselves into the future. So I do want to thank our committee, some of whom are represented here, but all the members of the parishes that form the larger committee. I do want to thank you for all your time, for all your effort, and especially those who were in the subcommittee who tried to steer this whole process in a good direction. So I do want to thank the committee, I want to thank the small group, and especially I would like to thank Mr. Dan Fessenden, who took on the responsibility of chairing this group and kind of bringing us to this night and tomorrow night. So let me introduce to you Mr. Dan Fessenden.
Thank you, Father Leoy. It's a pleasure to see so many. It's a pleasure to see so many people here tonight, and with interest in what our Catholic community is doing to plan for our future. And it is a privilege for me to be here to represent the committee that has been at work at some issues we will be prepared to share with you tonight. In thanking Father Leoy, I should also extend a thank you to Father John Gathenia as well, who was not able to be here tonight. These are 2 people, friends, leaders in our religious community that we rely on for so much. The task that the bishop gave them a year ago to make recommendations about Very difficult things. Closing churches, consolidating faith communities is a very difficult one for anyone, much less priests who have devoted to their lives to building churches. Dan, is it possible that the volume could be turned up some? If that's a persistent problem, I apologize. We'll rectify that. So you can understand the challenge that they had, but both Father John and Father Leoy felt strongly that they wanted to rely on a committee to provide them guidance, support, and direction as to how to respond to the bishop's invitation. What I'd like to review quickly is tonight's agenda, what we will do in our time together. I am going to review and introduce to you my fellow committee members. We'll review the process that we have used over these last several months. I'm going to invite some of the members of the committee to review some of the specific information that the committee has considered, and then I will share with you the committee's current set of recommendations. We'll open the floor for some questions, and it is my hope that we will be able to wrap this up by about 7:30. I'd like to start with a few very candid opening remarks. The parishes, worship sites, and school buildings we will be discussing are important places in our lives and our community, and they hold many, many memories for all of us. I can assure you some of what you hear this evening will be difficult to consider, and it will be tremendously difficult to not consider how these plans may affect you personally. The questions and challenges before us are incredibly difficult ones. The planning committee I will introduce has spent considerable time since last fall developing the plans we will review with you tonight. We will do our best in the time we have to share the information we have gathered, what we have learned, and the plans we believe will best serve our community. Let me be very candid. This planning process was initiated to come up with a reasoned and rational plan to reduce the number of churches and related facilities in our community for the future health of our parishes. The Planning Committee approached this assignment with seriousness, uncertainty, and a lot of anxiety. The committee is made up of representatives of each parish and church. It is made up of good Catholic people who were asked and agreed to examine the issues at hand fairly and make reasonable decisions that are for the good of the whole and the future of the community. What I ask of you is this: please consider the facts and information we will present. At the end of the presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask some questions, and committee members will field as many questions as we can. The handout material that you received contains a link to an online survey that we encourage you to use to submit your thoughts and comments to the committee. Sometimes when you don't like what is being recommended, there may be a temptation to criticize the process or even the people making the recommendations. I would ask you that you resist that temptation. It would be most helpful to the committee and our pastors if you provide us with any facts and information you believe supports a different plan or approach. The ultimate decision about the configuration of our parishes will be made by our bishop. Given that, I thought it would be appropriate to hear a few of the words that the bishop offered recently while he was here in Auburn at the Easter Vigil Mass on Holy Saturday. So the one piece of technology I've got to navigate is this piece. So bear with me just for 2 seconds.
So great a solemnity among the faithful of Auburn, including also the good people of Weedsport. I fully understand that you have very graciously and generously accepted the task of reviewing all the communities of faith in these areas in order to keep the faith of Auburn, Weedsport, vibrant and alive, making due note and consideration of the resources that are available to sustain you into the future. I am most grateful to the Planning Committee that has undertaken this task in collaboration with you, the faithful. I can assure you no decisions have been reached as I await the recommendation of the Planning Committee. I also wish to advise you that according to the universal legislation of the Church, the Code of Canon Law, in the objective order when any church or parish might close, those proceeds do not go back to the diocese, but rather they follow the parishioners to the new parish or parishes to which they will be ascribed. If an entity within a parish is sold, that money stays within the parish. It does not go back to the diocese. I do understand how very painful these undertakings are. Now well into my 8th year as your diocesan bishop, each year has brought its own challenges, increasing year by year. And now on the horizon of my 50th anniversary of priestly ordination in December, I wish still to continue as your bishop to see through all the challenges that are before us on so many levels. It is my firm intention to hand over to my successor a place that is free of the burdens with which we are now dealing, so that there might be a spiritual and pastoral rejuvenation, and that the flame of faith will only grow stronger in these communities of Auburn and the surrounding areas. From the time that I arrived in this diocese, I have visited Auburn on many occasions. It is a place dear to me, and how I wish decisions could be made. But times have changed, demographics have changed, and the pandemic has only exacerbated the challenges that are before us. But let us together seek the guidance of the Lord. Let us work collaboratively, and your cooperation with the Planning Committee, upon whom I rely and whose recommendations I await. Let us work together. I continue to work with bishops from other countries to send to us priests willing to take on a true missionary spirit and enrich the presbyterate of our diocese, as well as religious from other communities. But we must also work very diligently to raise up vocations within our own diocese from our own communities. For we must understand, without the Eucharist, there is no Catholic Church, and without the priesthood, there is no Eucharist.
Thank you for hearing those remarks from our bishop. Now I'd like to introduce the members of the Planning Committee. You're seeing some of them seated behind me, and the rest are in the pews amongst you. So if I could, I would love to invite the committee members to stand as I call your name to be recognized. I'm not sure all of them are here, but I'm going to assume a good share of them are. I'll start with Charlie Green, Janet Zane, Paul Ringwood, Michael Keegan, Nancy Camardo, Tim Kelly, Deacon John Tamandel, Jim Scanlon, Joan McCadden, Jim Malinowski, Dan Sozda, John Camardo, Ed Fenzel, and Penny Goodsell. Thank you. As Father Leoy said, planning is a never-ending process. This current phase was kicked off last year in June with a letter from Bishop Matano. Some of the excerpts from that letter is in the handout material before you tonight. The committee that is here tonight was formed and began meeting last fall. We were initially expected to make recommendations, believe it or not, by February. We did not feel that that was adequate amount of time, so we extended our work until spring. And I mind you, all of our work was done remotely through virtual meetings and whatnot. So it added those challenges as well. The recommendations you'll hear tonight were shared and discussed with members of the parish and finance councils of our region in March, and the committee modified our recommendations based on the input received from that meeting. And tonight is yet another opportunity for us to hear input from parishioners as we seek to finalize our recommendations. Now, I'd like to turn over the floor to a few of my colleagues who will discuss some of the findings and information that have been considered during this process. First, I'd like to ask Nancy Camardo to come up.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming today. My name is Nancy Camardo, and I have been a parishioner at St. Alphonsus for 28 years. When I was asked to join this committee, I was a little apprehensive to begin with, but I finally jumped in with both feet because I think it was very important to deal with these issues that have been hanging out there for over a decade. A final decision has to be made, a final plan has to be developed so that we can ensure a stable and viable Catholic community. I have been chosen, lucky me, to discuss the issue of the shortage of the priests. The information is on page 3 of the handout that you have. Before we discuss the nitty-gritty of the facts, I wanted to say that please keep in mind that at the core of every discussion that this committee held during these many months, the impact of the declining number of priests was kind of the overwhelming issue to consider, because everything else did not seem terribly relevant. So, starting with that, let us go to the page 3. Even though it looks like dry statistics, and they are pretty dry, they are very telling. First of all, the first thing to notice is that the comparison charts is only 5 years difference. So between 2016 and 2021, these massive differences have happened. First of all, in regard to the priests under 70, there was 86 priests in 2016. Now there is only 55. That is a reduction of 36%. Priests over 70, in 2016 it was 75 priests. Now it is 86, an increase of 15%. And the total number of priests went from 161 to 141, a difference of 12%. One thing to notice is that isn't really stated in this chart, that this 36% decrease of priests under 70. Priests under 70 now only represent 39% of the total number of priests. Priests over 70 now represent 61% of the total of the priests. As you can see from the comments below, 78 priests are assigned. 22 priests only are under 70. Over 70. 55 priests are under 70. That leaves us about 64 priests who are over 70 and are unassigned. I'm presuming that these are the priests, for example, like Father Lou and Father Enright, who fill in when available and capable. It's important to know that this Catholic community is not alone in this struggle of the shortage of priests. 64 other locations are in need of pastors. There's 172 churches in the Diocese of Rochester altogether. This trend is going to continue as the clergy age begins to increase. While it is wonderful that there are 7 new priests coming within the next 5 years, frankly, this will not even be sufficient to cover the losses through retirement or lack of priest capability during the same period. While the new retirement practice may help to a certain extent, it cannot stop the illness or lack of abilities that may occur among the elder priests. The recently announced priest assignments ensure that we will have 4 priests for the time being. However, the diocese has made it clear that the priests assigned to our community will increase to 3 sooner rather than later. And this change could come at any time given changing situations through the diocese. After going through this boring explanation of the facts, which was a necessary evil, we now must discuss on how these numbers and trends affect our community. Presently, we have essentially 9 churches that remain open and 4 priests to serve them all. This involves complicated schedules for the priests to follow, which leads them to different church on different days, on different times for masses. A priest will say a mass, leave the altar, may have a couple of minutes to talk to the parishioners, hop in their car and go to another church for another mass. This activity must be physically, mentally, and spiritually taxing on these men who give their lives to service. This relay race that has been created by this clustering is not viable, sustainable, or proper, and it is not in keeping with our mission of stewardship. It has not been reasonable or responsible to believe that, as we presently have or will have in the future, that enough priests will be there to support parish life at the sites we have today. As responsible members of the Catholic community, we must come together to make sure, in good stewardship, that we take the best advantage of the gifts the Lord has given us and provide a viable, vibrant, adaptable community that will always meet the needs of its parishioners and its clergy and will withstand any problems that may arise in the future. To reiterate what the Bishop Matano reminded us, without the Eucharist, there is no Catholic Church, and without the priesthood, there is no Eucharist. The priests are our most sacred advantage that we've been given by God, and we must use them properly and use them to the best of the advantage of the Catholic community. Not only are we suffering from the aging of the priests, we are also not the only trend we have to face. Not only is the population of our Catholic community and clergy declining, it is also aging. Societal trends are also impacting religion today, just not Catholicism. Unless we are able to reach people in new ways and invite them to become engaged Catholics, we are likely going to continue to find fewer parishioners filling our pews. This is not unique to our community. Throughout the country, people are choosing not to be involved in organized religion. We as Catholics are called to preserve our faith and pass them on to future generations, which requires a strong, viable Catholic community. Thank you. I'd like to next introduce Janet Zane, who will take the next couple topics of conversation.
Thank you, Nancy. Hello, good evening. My name is Janet Zane, and I'm a member of St. Anne's over in Owasco. During this segment of the discussion, I'd like to share information on parish life and finances You can find it on page 2 of the handout material. During the 8 years between 2011 and 2019, Auburn Catholic communities have lost some 700 households. During the same time frame, though we still offered the same 20 masses each weekend, attendance declined by about 1,500 people each weekend. Faith formation, First Communion, and confirmation numbers all declined by more than 50%. Of course, this decline had an impact on our offertory as well. Clearly, the fewer remaining parishioners are doing much more to support their faith communities. But it's a losing battle, since the only item on these 2 pages that you can see increasing is operating expenses. As a result, over these same 8 years, the savings of the collective group has been spent down by over $500,000. Information provided about parish life and financial trends is sobering and sad to view. The situation has changed drastically over the last decade, and the numbers presented do not even take into consideration the pandemic. Early in the committee's work, it was suggested that perhaps we should do nothing and recommend that all worship sites remain open. While the idea sounded appealing, the data suggested otherwise. Doing nothing would simply hasten the financial stress on our parishes and our families as they'll continue to struggle to maintain these 9 worship sites and related buildings. While the committee did look at individual parish data, the reality is we are one community with a limited number of families able to support parish life with our time, talent, and treasures. Although it is yet to be determined, we have reason to believe that the pandemic will have a lasting impact on our church. Parishioners who've broken the habit of attending Mass or supporting church may not return completely to their prior participation levels. So we had a lot on our plate, and we're trying to look to the future to make a vibrant community. And I guess we searched out data. I don't think that at any turn, as we looked at the information, that data was forthcoming. We did our best with what we currently have. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen going into the future, but I guess you'll hear more about the recommendations as we go forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Joan McAdam so she can handle the next few topics. Thank you.
Before I start, Deacon John Tamandel, that little brown purse in front of you is my phone that went off, and I apologize for that. I thought I shut it off. There's a side pocket and a little black phone in it. I don't want it going off again. Yes, all you have to do is hit the side button on the left and hold it until it shuts off. Are we good? Or shall I come and do it? I'm sorry. I sat here and thought I thought to myself as I was sitting here before it went off, it never goes off. Always people text me. Guess what happened? It went off. Okay. My part of this program has to do with geographic considerations and options. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so used to this mask. Can you hear me better? Okay, let me begin again. Is that going to work? Okay, all right. You can tell I'm not used to this. My topics are geographic considerations and options to choose an alternate church. Our region of the diocese consists of 6 parishes in Auburn and 3 outside of Auburn, from the hamlet of Owasco to the south and Cato in the north. I'm going to read the names of all those churches. St. Alphonsus, St. Mary's, St. Francis, St. Hyacinth, Holy Family, Sacred Heart. St. Patrick's in Cato, St. Anne's in Owasco, and St. Joseph's in Weedsport. All churches that we love. The committee felt it was important to maintain worship sites in as much as possible in the rural areas of the county to support parish life. We realized some parishioners in these rural churches were too close. Many would opt to attend Mass in neighboring counties or dioceses. And I can speak from personal experience that would happen at the northern part of the county. They would go toward Syracuse. We want to provide them with every opportunity to remain as part of our parish community and as part of our diocese. In some respects, we are very fortunate to have as many worship sites as we do, since most of us have convenient options to attend other Masses in Auburn, with some churches just a few blocks apart. The rest of the world is not so fortunate, and there are even parts of the United States that are not so lucky. My next goal here is to introduce the final speaker, who is Ed Fenzel from St. Mary's. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ed Fenzel from St. Mary's Parish. We're going to talk for a minute about the building conditions, and if you turn to page 4, on page 4 we can take a look at a summary there. The dollar amounts that you see with the estimated costs, they were put together with a tremendous amount of help from Sean Moran. He's a licensed architect and the manager of buildings and properties for the Diocese of Rochester. So we had a professional come in and take a look at the buildings and put these estimates together for us. Obviously, for this short period of time, we won't be able to go into the great detail, but just to give you an overall summary of repairs that we see coming in the near future on each parish, we can see that on page 4. So if you take a look first, you see St. Mary's overall and comparatively has a relatively small amount of repairs for the near-term future. Second, St. Hyacinth, where we're at right now, of course, just to hit a couple of high points, the school roof replacement and church exterior repairs, including limestone and brick masonry, as well as a number of other items. So about $300,000 of repairs needed for this, what the diocese calls a campus. The campus, of course, being all the buildings here at St. Hyacinth. At Sacred Heart, they're estimating $480,000 of repairs needed, and this would be for the roof at Sacred Heart. St. Patrick's, $14,000 of several comparatively small items. St. Anne's, the diocese did not take a look at, but overall it appears to be in good condition. St. Francis, $258,000 of repairs are being estimated. Some of those more important items being the repointing of the church exterior masonry and parish hall addition, some challenges there. So again, $258,000 estimated for St. Francis. St. Alphonsus, they're looking at needs a new roof replaced here shortly, and also the windows in the school. So St. Alphonsus, both of those are in the school, and about $1.1 million of repairs is what they're estimating there at the St. Alphonsus campus. At Holy Family, some of the highlights or lowlights, depending on how you look at it. Church roof and flashing needs replacement. The exterior finish is deteriorating and requires repair. The school roof needs replacing at Holy Family, and other items, as you can see, listed there. Total of estimate of $2.3 million in repairs is what they're estimating at the Holy Family campus. And that is a quick summary.
Thank you, folks. I've been sitting there trying to decide whether, if that was my cell phone over in the front pew, whether I would have owned up to it or not. But Joan, God bless you. That was a wonderful thing you did for us. Early in this process, the committee gave careful thought to the number of worship sites that we thought would be an appropriate number to have in our community given our situations. We arrived at a target number based on the many factors you just heard about here tonight. And we reached this decision without identifying any specific sites. It was just a generic number of sites we felt were appropriate. But once we had that target, that's when the hard work began of deciding which worship sites would best serve our community and which campuses would be candidates for closure. On page 5 of your handout, you'll see the current proposed restructuring plan. It proposes to reduce the number of worship sites in the Auburn area from 6 to 3, and the number of worship sites outside of Auburn from 3 to 2. The 3 worship sites selected by the committee to remain open in Auburn are Sacred Heart, St. Mary's, and St. Hyacinth. The 2 sites outside of Auburn are St. Patrick's in Cato and St. Anne's in Owasco. As a result, the sites that would be candidates for closure under this preliminary plan would include St. Joseph's in Weedsport, Holy Family, St. Francis, and St. Alphonsus. On the next page of the handout, you'll see some of the highlighted reasons each of these churches were selected to remain open. I'm going to review just some of the points on this page. When you looked at the data of the specific churches, Sacred Heart and St. Mary's are currently our 2 largest parishes. In fact, the 2 of them together represent half of all the parishioners in our region, half of the registered households. Half of us as Catholics attend Masses at Sacred Heart and St. Mary. And again, it's about half of the offertory support comes into those 2 churches. The theory is if you are building on the support and strength that we already have, those 2 churches made a lot of sense to the committee. It just so happens those 2 churches, one of them is from each of the existing clusters. But maintaining these 2 churches will minimize the amount of disruption on half of the Catholics in our community who currently call those 2 parishes their home. The facilities are in very good condition and well maintained at both of those. They represent 2 important geographic distinct areas of our community, one in downtown Auburn and one in Owasco. And they also possess a lot of variety of facilities that will be able to serve our community going forward. The 3rd church, St. Hyacinth, where we are tonight, was selected as the 3rd church to remain in Auburn because of its unique and compelling attributes and the capacity for it to meet some continuing needs here in our community. It also happens to be the largest church, seating capacity-wise. And it's also located on here in the northwest side of Auburn with close proximity to parishioners on the north side of Auburn, including Weedsport area. The 2 churches outside of Auburn, St. Anne and St. Patrick, were chosen for some other unique reasons. As Joan had mentioned, we feel strongly to maintain parish life outside of Auburn is important. Both of these churches are in good condition. One is located to the north, one to the south. Cato is the furthest from Auburn, about 17 miles, but also between here and Cato is Weedsport. So the parishioners in St. Joseph's and Weedsport theoretically would have good options to travel either north to Cato, south to Auburn to attend church. That is the work of the committee. Before I open it up for questions, I'd like to ask Joan to come back to the podium and share just a few perspectives, and then we'll open it up for questions.
I have a favorite singer. Her name is Bette Midler. She has a song which I love, and you probably all know, and it's called From a Distance. I want to be the person who asks you to look from a distance. I am a cradled Catholic, educated for 14 years in Catholic schools and college. In my lifetime, I have been a member of 7 different Catholic communities in the central part of this country and in the Northeast. As a child, I remember the good sisters of St. Agnes telling me that I could go anywhere in the world and feel at home in any Catholic church, and I have. When I came to this committee in the fall, I had no expectation that my little church, St. Patrick's in Cato, would survive. Yet I served because I wanted to be part of the journey to find our way forward. Let me tell you what I know. The early Christians practiced their faith in the catacombs, faced by persecution and martyrdom. Our belief in Jesus flourished in those days. No huge buildings, no stained glass, no statues of our saints. Throughout the planet, our faith flourished in all cultures across 2,000 years. Without those things in many areas of the world, in the rainforest, in the desert, in the wilderness, priests as circuit riders, going from community to community, humble structures or the great outdoors to celebrate the Eucharist. But these communities still remain, however modest, and they did so because of the people. And all of these things, structures, statues, stained glass, will pass at the end of our world, but our faith will remain. My husband Bob has a saying about physical possessions. The coffin in which I will be buried has no pockets. We go to God with our spirit only. So it does not matter the first name of the building, if at the last at that building is the 2 words, Catholic Church. This is my church, your church, our church, no matter the place. If I must travel to another church that is not currently my own, I will go as a Catholic and feel God's presence in the Eucharist and make that church my own. Will you come with me?
Thank you, Joan, for those words. And I'm realizing I'm remiss, and I don't think I even started tonight by thanking all of you for being here. You took some time and interest in wanting to hear what we've been working on, and that is appreciated, needed, and very much part of this process. I'm going to open it up for questions. We're going to do our best to field some questions from the floor. Before I do that, I'm going to call to your attention, you've probably already figured this out, but in the handout material there was a number of what we call FAQs, or frequently asked questions, that we kind of anticipated would be on your minds. And so I'm not asking you to read them all right now, but please know that there's some answers there for you to some of the questions that we've heard throughout this process. But we're going to try our best here. Dan Sozda. Dan, stand up. Thank you for hosting us here in your parish. Dan is a member of the committee, and he's going to do his best with that microphone to get to a few people that can ask a question, and we'll do our best. to try to answer, and I'm going to call on not just these members of the committee, but any member of the committee that's here tonight that would like to respond to a question. I'll try to field it, and if you can't hear the question, I'll repeat it so everyone knows what it is. So, show of hands, if there's a question right out of the gate here that we'd like to start with. Dan? Oh, sorry. John, why don't you just, you can just say it and I'll repeat it. Well,
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is John Camardo. I'm a member of the Planning Committee, and it was an honor and a privilege to serve with my colleagues on this committee. But I have to say that I don't agree with them. I don't think any church in Auburn should be closed at this stage of the game. I think each parish is unique and special in its own way. I know that every church in Auburn had a school at one time. We had a vibrant community. But as you see, all the problems that the committee is addressing comes down to one common denominator, and that is we don't have people in the pews. So why aren't we spending these times to bring people back to church and encourage people to come to church? Because these problems are not, thank you, these problems are not going to go away. And I think under the leadership of Bishop Montano, he should be encouraging memberships throughout our communities to look at how we get people back to church, because once a church is closed, it's closed forever. And I always remember that when Jesus said to Peter, go out and build my church, he didn't say close my church. And I don't think we should be looking at that right now on closing churches, because we don't have a problem with financial. I think we're pretty well set financially across the Auburn community. So I think it's a time that we say to Bishop Montano, that we want to put this on hold and we want to look at bringing people back to church before we look at closing churches. Thank you.
Where's Dan? Do we have a microphone that works, Dan? No? We aren't going to make it work very easily by coming up and down, but Penny, do you want to stand up and...
Evangelization was not what this committee was asked to do by Bishop Montano. Evangelization, as much as we all believe would be a wonderful thing, was not what this committee was asked to do by the bishop. So we have to do what the bishop is asked the committee to do and give him a recommendation. It will then be in his hands. So we need to have our faith in what the committee has done to this point.
So, Father, do we have a microphone that's working now? We do not. This is not going to work well, and I apologize. Penny's comment was that the charge of this committee was not to work on evangelization. There's been other committees and should be other committees that work on a lot of other issues. The charge of this committee was a narrow, focused one, and we are responsive to the charge of the committee. I would make the comment, as you heard from John, who was a member of the committee, we did not reach unanimity on all issues. We did not. How could we? But we did reach a very strong consensus amongst the committee of the recommendations you're hearing tonight. And I will say to you this as well, one more thing as chair of this committee. I was surprised at how readily this committee came together to reach the conclusions and the recommendations that we have for you here tonight. And that's not to say that that would mean all of you would come to the same conclusion. I get that. But I'm telling you, there was 16 people that worked on these issues that landed on what you're hearing tonight. And I respect John's advocacy, I really do. And there's other members of the committee that had some very strident points of view that weren't represented in the end product. But I share with you tonight what is the general work and consensus of the committee. Do we have? Oh, we've got a microphone, maybe?
A new one.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure I need a microphone, but we'll use it. I also did not agree with all of the conclusions reached by the committee, and I will not share my disagreements tonight. It's not appropriate. I will say that the only thing, and I totally agree with Joan, the only thing that keeps our Catholic faith alive is the Eucharist, where we celebrate Mass, have the sacraments available to us, share our common faith. That's all that's important. That really is. In deference to the obvious human needs, someone else, this committee was not charged with this, but someone else must work with the results that the committee has published, either agree with them or modify them, moving forward, because at some point in the future, and I don't necessarily think it needs to be this June, but God didn't make me the bishop, so I don't know about that. But at some point in the future, we can't keep 9 buildings in proper repair, available for celebration of sacraments and worship. It's just impossible. If you evangelized every single Catholic who ever claimed to be Catholic in the city of Auburn and Cayuga County, there aren't enough people to make up the numbers we had 35 or 40 years ago, because our population has dropped from roughly 42,000 to this last census. Last numbers aren't in yet, but I'm predicting 26,000. That's half. So we need to look at this. It has to be done. It hurts. I do disagree with some of the stuff that we've discussed, but this isn't the place to do that. The next step is, and we need to look at it, but we've got to remember that we need to be Catholics, and we need to be generous, kind, forgiving, and loving.
And proximity to the mic right over here.
Dan, I don't know, Father. Okay. I won't fight the problem. Which way? I'm used to shooting off my mouth, but not on a mic. Dan, you know, my background is basically financial, and I've heard the pleas, and I agree. It breaks my heart to see any church, temple, mosque, whatever, close. It really does. But the population has gone down. That's not my real question. The question is, of the properties that we're foreclosing on, abandoning, whatever you want to call it, selling, who's responsible for maintenance of those until they're gone?
Ultimately, the diocese would make that decision, but I believe, to answer off the top of our heads, each parish would continue to keep up the maintenance on it until it does transfer.
We've got a microphone coming.
We'll buy him sneakers for tomorrow night. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, I'm, oh my God, it worked better than I thought it did. I'm Bill Staley. I'm involved with St. Mary's. But I guess a couple of comments I'd like to make. Number one is rumor patrol. A while back, I received a rumor, I'm going to call it a rumor because I don't think it was false. It was false, for sure, that the bishop had a secret plan to close this, that, and the other church and to take all their monies that they have accumulated in their collections or whatever and have it in the diocese and blah, blah, blah. To me, rumors. So watch out for those things. And number two was even the media. Now, yesterday there was an article in the paper about maybe this meeting, but also about some of the conclusions or the recommendations of this committee. And some people were taking this gospel, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. So again, it becomes a rumor. And so I caution you people, let's look at those things and make sure you dispel that with the people that it's not fact, it's not done, it's just a suggestion. And so that, I think it's rather important because a lot of people got very, very excited. I had 2 or 3 people that contacted me yesterday and said, oh, they're going to close St. Mary's, they're going to close this. I didn't hear nothing about that. Well, what it is they take it wrong. They miss a key word, maybe in the statement or whatever. They don't intend it maybe, but it turns out to be a rumor and people get all upset. So let's be very careful of that. And then I guess thirdly, I'm going to say that the real big way of changing this is to fill the pews. Now I know that's difficult because the demographics of Auburn have changed. There's less industry than there used to be, et cetera, et cetera. But if we fill the pews, the bishop has no choice but to keep us all open and vibrant. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Excellent suggestions. Everybody, please do your homework as you move forward and have these discussions. Make sure you're looking at the facts as we go forward. We've worked very hard to gather the facts here in this committee. And to Bill's point as well, this committee does not have the authority to open a church or to close a church. That remains, of course, with our bishop. Yes, next question, please.
My name is Sue Gatto, and I'm the financial trustee for St. Francis of Assisi Church. And I understand we don't want any church to close. I think the majority of everybody here agrees with that. But we should be given a chance to put a plan together before you make the recommendations. I look at your financial situation, and I can only speak for my church. As you know, St. Francis and St. Hyacinth merged to become St. Mary Martha Parish. We are one parish, and now we're being divided. We constantly have fundraisers. We are in the positive. We do a lot of outgoing things, and we are financially sound, but yet you want to shut our doors down because you say, well, St. Mary's and Sacred Heart bring in the most money. We are up on our CMA appeal. I've looked at the numbers for other churches. I just feel that you need to relook at that and to close a financially sound church at this time and then expect us to continue until a decision's made is not right. Again, we don't want to see any church close. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Excellent. Sue, I appreciate you doing your homework on it. Thank you. Other questions, anybody? Over on this side? Oh, here's one. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm Jack O'Neill from St. Joe's, Weedsport. And the first thing that I noticed in this report here is that the only mention of St. Joe's in the report is the fact that we're 8 miles from Auburn and 8 miles from Weedsport. There's nothing else in there, no mention of anything. And we also, Port Byron is 3 miles away, and that's been closed already, and we're doing Weedsport, St. Joe's to serve Port Byron people, and as well as Weedsport, and we don't have to travel 8 miles one way or the other. I've got 1,000 questions I'd like to ask, but I just would mention one more thing at the present moment, and that is that our CMA donation, according to the bulletin that we got this week, St. Joe's is the only one that's made its goal. The rest of the churches have not made it. So I just don't understand. And there's a lot of other reasons that St. Joe's should be considered before you drive 8 miles. We have to drive 8 miles to Cato or 8 miles to Auburn. You can ask some of these people if they've driven the 8 miles to Cato in the wintertime. That is not fun. Just keep that in mind as well. And Cato people, St. Patrick, have about 5 or 6 churches closer to them than Weedsport, and my guess is that most of them will be going to those, to Wolcott, Red Creek, Hannibal, Beeville, Jordan, and so on. That's 5 of them there. There's more than that, I think. And I got more questions I may have tomorrow, but that's it.
Very good. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate your comments. Very good comments, Jack. Who else has questions? There's the mics going in the back. We got time for 1 or 2 more questions. He's got the mic in the back, so if you get the mic's attention after this, and you'll have time. There's one we can do over here next. Okay, go ahead, ma'am, please.
Hi, my name is Mary Latnishin, and I'm a member of Holy Family Parish. My question is if we do go to this proposed plan of the 3 different churches, would we be like a cluster, or is each parish individual with its own priest?
We did not discuss that in that detail. That would be up to the pastors and the discussions with the bishop. So don't have an answer for you on that one.
Okay, so my question is then, you say, or Bishop Matano referenced in his homily, that the money would stay with the parishes. How do we designate where the money goes if it's going to go to Sacred? I mean, if half of Holy Family's parish goes to Sacred Heart and half goes to St. Mary's, how are financially we going to rectify where the money goes?
Yeah, excellent question. So first of all, just to reiterate what Bishop Montano said, most importantly, that those funds would stay within the Northern Cayuga County community. How it's divvied up within the remaining parishes, I believe, Father, there is a structure historically that's happened. I don't know the answer to your question right now, but it's certainly something we can have answered for you. Go ahead.
I can only tell you from my experiences elsewhere in the Diocese of Rochester that typically what happens when parishes are closed, that they are grouped with other parishes. So that grouping is what we don't have the answer to. But the money, as Bishop Montano said, would stay locally. So however they're grouped, or what with the remaining church, that's where you would be, I guess virtually you would be, thinking you're going to attend the closest church to you, that would be your church, and so the funds would also go there. Until the buildings are sold or whatever, decommissioned, you'd have to be responsible, but once they are, the proceeds also stay locally. The diocese really doesn't factor into those kind of decisions. I think it's up to the local pastors.
We've got time for one more. Where's our microphone?
Hi. Can I speak? My name is Andrea Berbilis. I'm a parishioner at Sacred Heart. I'm 62 years old. I've lived in Auburn most of my life, and I've attended many of the churches here in town. And I do want to take some time to thank these people for giving of their time and talents to deal with a rather painful subject. My only concern is I don't want to be sitting in another church in 10 years as we go from the proposed 3 churches down to what? I think the greater concern here, and I do understand the financial impact, and I do understand we have less people attending churches, and I'm really surprised that the bishop did not want to entertain working on ways to increase the sizes of the parishes rather than just shut the church down. I've always been taught that Catholics do the hard work. We take on the hard choices. We make the hard decisions. Closing a building, and this is no disrespect to you people, is the easy choice. Trying to figure out how to get more people into the buildings and how to worship God is the hard choice. So I would ask all of you sitting here tonight not to just leave this meeting and say, well, we'll worry about it later. We really need to take up this case within our parishes and make a serious commitment, a serious commitment to figure out how to get more people into churches, how to make our Catholic faith more applicable to people who are not Catholics or maybe haven't been practicing Catholics in a while. Because I really don't want to be part of another meeting where we've got to figure out how to close more buildings. That's not what God wants us to do.
To that comment, I think we can all say amen. Amen. And what I'd like to do, and I know I'm going to risk making this a hard thing, is to try to bring this to a close. I'm going to give you a couple of thoughts, though, that I need you to think about. One is that thought right there, and that is there is still hard work to do, and we can do that. It takes people to be involved and get into committees, and there's nothing that suggests under this plan or any different plan that we can't go out there and do the exact work that brings more people to the Catholic faith. So let's all take that home as an assignment. I'm going to share with you just a few next steps, and then I'm going to wrap this up. We're going to have another meeting tomorrow night, just like this one. I don't know if you want to come back for round 2, you're welcome. If you want to encourage your neighbors or your friends to come back and hear some of the same information, I would encourage you to do that. We're having a video made of tonight's meeting that will be available and posted online in hopefully not too short order for the people that can't or aren't comfortable coming back into a church yet. On that handout material, there is a link to a survey. It provides you that opportunity that some of you didn't have tonight to ask a question, to pose a comment or a thought. Please use that. We will look at all of that information that's provided in making our final recommendations. All of that input will be reviewed. The recommendations that this committee will make will be submitted to our pastors in early May, and they will subsequently submit those recommendations to the diocese. It will be up to the bishop to consider the recommendations and decide when or if to implement them. We have no understanding at this stage what the timing of that decision would be, so that's something that we'll have to all pay attention to. In the meantime, I want to say thank you again, not just to all of you for being here, but especially to the members of the committee that have worked hard on this project. We appreciate your support, understanding, and very much value your input. Thank you. Have a safe evening.